We've seen this issue all throughout the district, from the streets of Bend, national forests, homeless camps, homeless site cleanups throughout the district. What concrete steps would you take to address the homelessness crisis at the federal level?
Is it my, I get to
I'm
go
so
first?
Sorry, Representative Bynum, that is for you.
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure.
Sure. Well, addressing the homeless crisis at the federal level, I think it's a variety of attacks, meaning attacking the problem. So as an engineer, I kind of think of what are the root causes and how do we fix them. One of the things I'm really proud of is working on tiny homes, transitional housing, making sure that we had the legislation available so that people could have transitional housing sites, making sure that we had the infrastructure to develop transitional housing sites. I think it's more infrastructure that is needed from the federal government rather than less. What I really think is important is that we can't trust Lori Chavez-DeRemer to even offer that funding, because she is a part of a regime in Washington, D.C. that is not getting anything done. So we heard her say she's on 300 bills. I don't know how many of them have passed, but it's just rubber stamping the Trump agenda, rubber stamping a chaotic agenda, and we're not moving the needle on housing as we should.
Congresswoman DeRemer, what concrete steps would you take to address the homelessness crisis at the federal level?
Well, thank you. We've worked hard on this issue because the state has failed, which is this is a state issue, housing, how we're going to have more affordability. But I want to just go back quickly to what bills have passed. I think she threw out some nonsense about not knowing how to spell fentanyl. Well, I can tell you this, one of the bills signed by the President of the United States was the Fend Off Fentanyl Act, to make sure that we can protect our young again on the street. So we work hard in Congress and making sure that those bills come forward that fix the problems that Oregonians that she's created on the streets and on the homeless and housing and affordability. I have worked continuously on that to give the funding on the infrastructure for small communities that the state will not help. Small communities like Bend, like Redmond, we give them the infrastructure projects to be able to grow in order to have that housing affordability. But we have done the American Relief for Families Act, the Choice and Affordable Housing bill that I supported, that I've worked through HUD with, and child tax credits and child tax for dependents, so that people can afford their rent. So the voucher program that I have sponsored as well. So we're doing our part at the federal level, and she won't hold out her hands to help Oregonians.
Thank you.
All right, let's stay with the homeless issue for just a moment, and let's start with you, Congresswoman DeRemer. The homeless crisis having a particularly big impact here on Central Oregon. We've witnessed a number of fires across the area. One in particular that comes to mind is the Darlene 3 fire down near Lapine. That one determined to have been started in an encampment. These are individuals who are spending months, if not years, on federal land. The BLM, the Forest Service, both basically crickets when asked, what are you doing about the 14-day limit that people have to camp out on federal land? Do you believe part of the homeless solution should involve federal agencies? And should things like the Forest Service and BLM be doing more?
Well, certainly working together. Interagency coalitions are so important in Congress, making sure that we're addressing what the problem is, and then assisting our state partners when they're failing at doing their job as well. But we do have a lot of federal lands here in Central Oregon and really throughout the state, 60%, and talking to what that's going to do at the local level, the state level, and then the federal level. We want to make sure that there's funding for, one, mitigating our forests and making sure that we're managing them in a way that they're not burning up at such 2 million acres that we experienced this cycle, making sure that we have the wildland firefighters. But when we're talking about the homelessness, we have to make sure that we're assisting these people in the streets. We're talking about drug addiction, mental health, homelessness, all wrapped around together. One of the bills that I have been working on is the Direct Care Act, street medicine, working with Mosaic right here in Central Oregon to address the needs of our most vulnerable and making sure, and then talking about the forest fires, because we have to address that. I mean, millions of acres can go up at the heat that we're experiencing, and so I am doing everything I can, but the state government has to step up and make sure that we're managing and supporting our local agencies as we're doing so, but we need to get more funding to our local agencies as well.
Representative Bynum, what are you willing and prepared to do to get more federal resources in to deal with the homeless living in the forests?
Well, I think it's important to point out that Lori Chavez-DeRemer also, supported an arbitrary cut of 30% to federal government resources.
Not true.
And that, I think, is quite shameful. So when you talk about agencies working together with our state agencies and our city level elected leadership, there can't be that if your impetus is to go in and cut immediately. So I think it's a bit disingenuous to say you want to work together, yet you want to cut the very services that Oregonians really rely on, which would be BLM. I mean, that is basic to me. So I think that that's one piece to focus on. The other one is just quite simply the reasons for homelessness. I think it's inhumane to step over bodies on the streets or in our forests. I think it's inhumane, and we should work harder to make sure that that is not a reality for any other Oregonian.
I'm guessing few disagree with you there. However, the question I asked was not answered by either one of you. What is the federal role, BLM, Forest Service, in maintaining a 14-day limit on people camping in the forests when there's so many fires around here and so much threat to the residents of Central Oregon?
Yeah, the enforcement is what's key. That's what you ask. And that's supporting and getting the funding for the local agencies and finding the manpower to do so, to enforce and working with the local agencies. The BLM lands and the forest lands, I work every day in Congress with our agencies, making sure that we can have that conversation. And so she's not telling the truth again about funding. She is talking about specifically nothing that has to do with that. And what was her answer? I just think we should work harder. Well, what have you been doing for 10 years at the state agency to support this? Nothing. You have not, there's more homeless today than there was when you started because you have failed in your policies.
Representative Bynum, if you are elected to Congress, what is the priority when it comes to the BLM and the Forest Service dealing with those spending months, if not years, in the woods?
Well, it's clearly a priority, and I believe in enforcement. I think that it is also very important that as you enforce, you have somewhere for people to go. So one of the things that we've learned over time is shifting people from place to place to place is not a solution. The solution has to be holistic. You have to have wraparound services, you have to have additional housing units, and you have to have enforcement, and you have to be serious. My opponent is not serious about bringing solutions. That's the difference. We can't trust her.